I'm glad you're here, and we are in week 4 of our 5-week series. We're going to wrap it up next week, called Tough Questions, Life-Changing Answers. And we've been looking at some questions that maybe you have, but maybe you just have friends or people you work with, family members who have some of these questions, and we've tried to answer some of them along the way, at least give you some hope to understand them a little bit better. And we're going to talk about one of those questions, probably one of the more prevalent questions or statements that you'll find out in society today. We're going to talk about, is there only one way to heaven? And that's really the question that a lot of people have, because the world that you live in today doesn't believe that, just so you know. But we're gonna look at John chapter 14. If you have your Bibles, if you don't, that's fine. We're gonna have it on screen too. But John chapter 14, I always like to see it in my own hand, and I have a pen usually, and I'm highlighting, underlining, making notes in my Bible. But you do what you need to do. Tough questions though. Questions that there's always somebody asking me. Sandra asked me a question today, and I wasn't prepared for answering it. And so, there's always somebody asking you a question you're not prepared for. So I get that. Not all the time do we have all the answers. And I'd be the first one to say, I really don't know everything. That's for sure. But you know what? We ought to know a few things. In fact, the Apostle Peter told us that we should be ready to give an answer of the hope that lies within us. And that's where we're at. That's what's so important to me. I want to know the truth. Because Jesus said, if you know the truth, it's going to set you free. And we live in a world that's full of bondage and despair today. In John chapter 14, we have this setting, and if you've been in our adult Sunday school classes, we've been going through the book of John, and so you're familiar with what's going on. John chapter 14 is part of the upper room discourse, and that's a fancy term for a sermon that Jesus preached when he was in this upper room having the Last Supper. In fact, if you've been to a communion, Lord's Supper setting in church, this is where we get it from, John chapter 13. And Jesus starts telling his disciples, his closest followers. Now, just so you know, the one guy who wasn't serious about following Jesus, he got up and left early. So if you get up and leave early today, no, that's another thing. That goes through my mind. I had thoughts like that every time. So you don't be thinking, he thinks I'm Judas. No. Judas did get up and he left early because he's going to go out and betray Jesus. This is just hours before Jesus is going to be taken into custody. He's going to be falsely accused. There's going to be a lot of breaking of the law by the Pharisees, by the Jews, by the high priest. And then they're going to bring him off to the Romans, and eventually he'll be crucified and put in the tomb for 3 days. But we know the truth that he is not here. He is risen. And that's the greatest hope we have, and that's why we're here today. But not everybody believes that. Jesus in John 14, if I were to talk to you about what John 14 is all about, Jesus is trying to help his disciples understand the connection between him and them post-resurrection. But he hasn't even died yet, and that's the hard part. They are confused. They don't even understand. And so they start asking questions, and questions are hard. I don't know if you're one of those people, like, I get frustrated sometimes, and I'm going to use my wife. She's going to be mad at me about this, but I didn't tell her ahead of time. My wife frustrates me sometimes, and I don't know if any of you other guys get this, but my wife expects me to know a lot. And so she peppers me with questions. You guys ever been sitting down, turn a movie on, and your wife comes and goes, what's this movie about? Who's doing this? What's going on? I'm like, I don't know. I just turned it on. I know as much as you do. Anybody else got that one? And some of you guys are like, I'm scared to answer that question because she's sitting in here. I'm just telling you, but I feel like sometimes my frustration comes out because we get a lot of questions like, what's going to happen? What's this? I don't know. In fact, that's usually my frustration builds up to finally look at my wife and go, I don't know. I really don't. And maybe that's how Jesus, now I know he's God, but he probably had some frustrations on this last evening or this last meal in this upper room with his disciples, because John 14, Jesus answers 4 questions. One of them is not really a question, but it's a statement, but it brings about some things in their minds that were probably questions. But John gives us 4 questions the disciples started asking, and Jesus gives answers to help connect them to him and his resurrection. And the first one is actually in John chapter 13, because remember, these chapters and books, the markers were put in there way afterwards to help us just sort of understand where we're at. So in the end of John 13, Peter asks Jesus the first of these 4 questions, where are you going? You ever had that question asked to you? I mean, where are you going? And that was a question, not physically where are you going, because in just a moment, at the end of John chapter 14, they actually get out of the upper room and they go up to the Temple Mount, because John 17, the famous prayer, was the high priestly prayer prayed in the temple. And then they go down to the Garden of Gethsemane, and you know the rest of the story there. But where are you going? Because Jesus had made some comments that I'm going to leave and you can't follow me. And you're going to be thinking like, where are you going? And that's exactly what they were thinking. Jesus knew, though, and if you go back to John 13, the setting of John 13, Jesus is troubled in his heart. He was 100% God, but he's also 100% man, and he was troubled in his heart. And he also knew that if he's troubled, guess who else is going to be troubled? You ever been troubled? No? I'm telling you, it's almost every day. There's something that troubles me, something that bothers me. That's why I stopped watching the news, right? That's all trouble there. There's some people I can't hang out with much because they trouble me, right? You ever been around people like that? If you haven't, you're that person, just so you know, okay? So I'm just helping you out today. If you haven't been around that person, you are that person. But Jesus understood this troubling effect, and you know what he understood about trouble? The troubled heart eats away at your faith. Did you know that? A troubled heart eats away at your faith. That's what Jesus understood. And so faith, and this is so weird, a troubled heart eats away at your faith, but faith calms the troubled heart. It works both ways. And so Jesus, what does he do? He looks at him, and we're going to get into this just a minute, but he says the famous, let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. And really, in a better translation, it would be, keep on believing in God and in me also. Keep on believing. What is he talking about? Faith. Because they didn't know where he was going. The second question was, how can we know the way? And that's a pretty famous one. Thomas asked this question because Jesus has been telling them all this stuff, and they still didn't get it. And of course, Jesus is talking about the way to heaven, because he responds with John 14:6. We all know that's a pretty famous verse, right? Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And so Jesus here in this statement here, he's trying to help them because here's what, the first 12 chapters of John's narrative, John's been telling you that Jesus is life and he's truth, and he's life and he's truth. You know why life and truth are so important? They are attributes of deity. They are divine attributes of God. And so here's the connection. If we know that Jesus is life and we know that Jesus is truth, life and truth have to understand the way to God. And that's how important. And that's what was perplexing the disciples, because they're like, how can we know the way? And Jesus gives them hey, if you know me, you know the way. The third question is not really a question, it's a statement. It's a statement that's made after this. It's show us the Father. Show us the Father and it'll be enough for us. That's the full statement. Show us the Father, which you got to see. I imagine Jesus, he doesn't have the sinful attributes that I have, but I would have been rolling my eyes, been like, oh. I don't know if Jesus was frustrated with him, but I would have been. That's why I'm not God, though. But Jesus, he's wanting them to see this truth. And Jesus goes on to explain after they say, show us the Father. Hey, you know what? You've seen me 3.5 years. You've been walking around me, and you didn't notice, because you know what the other gospel writers understood? In the book of Hebrews, it says that Jesus is the express image of God. Do you get that? Jesus is the express image of God. There's nobody else that's going to get closer to your understanding of God than Jesus, because he is God. In fact, John himself, back in the very beginnings, to preface everything he was going to tell you about who Jesus was through his narrative, he says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word, that is Jesus Christ, was God. And so these disciples, they're still trying to figure out, well, who are you? What are you doing? And so they come up with this whole show us the Father, and Jesus says, you've seen the Father, you've seen me. That's the whole idea. And then the fourth and final question comes way at the end of chapter 14, verse number 22. This is the question, why do you intend to show yourself to us and not to the world? Why are you revealing yourself? Why are you making yourself manifest? And remember, Jesus has told them that he's going to give them this comforter. He's going to give them the Holy Spirit to live within them. But Jesus, and this question is posed by a different disciple, a guy named Judas, but not the Judas Iscariot. His name really was Thaddeus or Labius. You could go with either one of those. But he comes up with this, like, how come you're going to show yourself to us and you're not going to show yourself to the rest of the world? And Jesus says, you know what? There are basically three ways I'm going to let you know who I am as we move forward in this relationship. And he tells them by fellowship. In verse number 23, he tells them by the indwelling fellowship that they have. He tells them by the Holy Spirit, the indwelling of this comforter that's coming in verses 24 through 26. And then he says that famous statement, hey, and I'm going to give you peace too. That's the third way. That's how he's manifesting us and not to the world. I'm going to give you peace, and not peace like this world has, but peace of God. And those are the three things. And those questions may have probably, I don't think they could baffle God because he's got it all under control, but they're so important in our understanding of who God is. That brings us to that question we want to answer today. Is there only one way to heaven? Is there only one way to heaven? You see, we live in a world, I was reading a book not too long ago where this guy was explaining how things have changed. From the 70s on, information has changed greatly. And some of you would say, like, the 70s, that long ago? I get it. There's some of you that are very young in here, and that's cool. I understand that you don't understand the old stuff. I don't get it either, but here's the deal. Prior to the 1970s, religion in America was pretty much one tent, Christianity. Everybody went to church. What are you doing this Sunday? We're going to church. Even people who didn't believe much in God, even people who might have spent their night at a bar on Saturday night and high as a kite doing stuff like that, they had some pretty moral culture that was pressing them to go to church. So everybody, and you go back and ask your parents, your grandparents, all that, they'll tell you, everybody went to church. Because some of you young people might be like, how come there's so many churches in Seagrove and they're all half empty? Because things have changed. See, we've had this change of information. Information seems to be a good thing, but it also can be a curse, right? So as we've gotten more globally connected, as we've gotten more into technology, we've gotten more into this internet, and they're not bad things, they're tools. What it's done is it's brought a plethora of different religions close to us to help us understand or not understand things clearly. See, here's the thing. If I go to a place that serves hamburgers and only hamburgers, I don't have any problem, right? What am I getting? Hamburger, right? You don't like hamburger, you're tough, right? You get nothing else. But when I go to a place that has hamburgers and chicken and steak and shrimp and pasta and you name it, I have a dilemma then, right? Isn't that the hardest thing? In fact, how many couples you go out to eat and you're struggling like, what do we want to eat? Come on, you can admit to this. Yeah, that's the big debate, isn't it? In fact, it almost comes to blow. Sometimes in our family, I'll ask my wife, what do you want to eat? And she'll give me 4 different things. Like, 4? She's like, well, I could eat anything, but here's 4 choices. I said, I didn't ask you what 4 things do you want to eat. What 1 thing do you want to eat? And we go through round and round. I do the same thing to her, so I'm picking on her, but it's really, everybody does it, don't we? Don't we? Come on, be honest. Okay. The reason being is, there probably was a day and time when we didn't have many choices. In fact, I remember as a kid growing up, we didn't go out to eat. You know what we did? My dad said, I'm not taking you out to eat because you might embarrass me. So we're going home, and Mom's cooking. Mom's cooking was better in any restaurant anyway. And so, I'll just tell you this much. You walk in the house, you never ask, what's for dinner? Those words were offline. They weren't allowed. Okay, maybe in your house you're allowed to do that. There was a couple rules my mom had about her kitchen. And it was her kitchen. First of all, you're not allowed in it when she's cooking. Number 1. No lie. You can't, you had to have a special dispensation from God if you wanted to cross through. The garage was on the other side of the house. You could not go in the kitchen. I'm serious. The carpet ended, the tile and the linoleum picked up. That was Mom's territory. Don't go in there because you'd probably get killed. Number 2, you're not allowed to know what's to eat because you are going to criticize if you don't like it. And my mom said, I don't care, this is what we're having, and you will eat what I put down on the table. So there's no choice there. And that's the greatest thing. There was no choice. I loved it, except for when I didn't like what she cooked. But obviously I had a problem with that, right? You can tell. That's the whole idea. And until I knew there was all these choices, I never had that problem. Because my parents would sit the dinner down in front of us, and we would eat. And you would eat. That was how meals worked. Nowadays, we're just so picky, aren't we? We got to have this and that. And I remember fussing at my wife because my kids, like, my oldest son, Daniel, he's not here to defend himself, but he fits this. My oldest son, even now, if we were living down in Florida and he was living with us, he would call my wife up on the phone and say, hey, what's for dinner? And she would tell him. I'm sitting there going, don't tell him. Tell him it's food, because I know it's going to happen next. She'd say, hey, we're going to have chicken. He'd say, what kind? And she would go to tell him whatever kind it was, and he'd go, ugh, I ain't eating that garbage. My son would say that to my wife, and I'm sitting there like steam's coming off me because I'm going to grab hold of that boy's throat and, he's going to have to call 911. And so he would, seriously, you can ask my wife if this is true or not, he would sometimes just, I'm going out. And you know what's crazy? He would stop by like Taco Bell, Zaxby's or something like that. And I'm like, you eating that garbage? You're eating that garbage? I mean, you go to Taco Bell, you're going to get a good case of indigestion with some other stuff too. Montezuma, he made a living there. I'm just saying, you can eat it, you can like it, but there's some problems with it. And I just learned this stuff, and I'm just like, but the more choices we have, the more problems we have. Isn't that true? The more choices we have. And that's what's happened globally to us as we listened. I was just trying to think, when I was a kid, and for you younger people, this won't make any sense to you, but when I was a kid, nobody talked about Islam. It was out there, but that's in a far distant country, right? Nobody talked about foreign religions. Hey, we had Christianity and a few cults out there, the Mormons and people like that. But it was Christianity. We went to church 3 times a week, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, 3 to 5, right? And now all of a sudden we're like, hey, I don't have to do any of this stuff. I don't have to do any of this stuff. Why? Because I have choices. And now we started saying, hey, because I have choices, that might affect my beliefs, right? So we came with this idea like, hey, in fact, this is the atheistic view of life, and just so you understand it, they'll tell you like, hey, you know why you're a Christian? It's because you were born in the United States. If you were born in the Middle East, you'd be an Muslim. You'd follow the practices of Islam. If you were born in Asia, you'd follow half a dozen different religions there. So they're saying basically, religion's something you've inherited. And because of that, we don't want anybody to feel bad about where they were born because they couldn't help that they were born there. You didn't have any say in where you were born, what country. So basically they're going to say, hey, let's make it okay for everybody because we don't want anybody to feel out of place. So all roads, all paths lead to God, lead to heaven. And this is a view that I just explained is called universalism. Universalism is a belief that all religious beliefs end up getting to the same place. Basically, it's like this. The best way I can explain it is there's a mountain, and God's on the very top of the mountain, and we're all at different sides of the mountain, and we're all going up on our different sides. And we're all going to get there. Our paths are just going to be different. And that's how humanism, that's how atheism, that's how everybody, well, atheists don't say there's a God, so but they take that view and they sort of tear it apart. But that's what a lot of people in today's society believe about it. When the people you're talking to, oh, hey, it doesn't matter. In fact, I've heard people say, well, my religion is the same as your religion. Well, maybe, but I don't have a religion. I have a Savior, Jesus Christ, and I have a Bible. That is the Word of God, and that's the truth. And then they look at people like me and say, well, you know what the problem with you? You are just narrow-minded. You're not very tolerant. Okay, yeah, I agree with that. Because I'm as narrow-minded as God is. And that's the truth, and I'm not going to apologize for that. I'm as narrow-minded as what the Word of God says. And that's the question we want to look at today. Is there really only one way to heaven, and how do we know that? In John chapter 14, Jesus, as he's talking, and I've told you the background so you understand it. John chapter 14, verses 1 through 7, we're going to go through them real quick, and then we'll break these down to 3 truths that you need to understand. Jesus says this, do not let your hearts be troubled. Remember, the troubled heart deteriorates our faith, but faith is the answer to the troubled heart. Don't let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. Why? Because God and Jesus are one and the same. That's the issue that we have to really stand on. Verse number 2, My Father's house has many rooms. Now, you may be reading the King James where it says mansions. Let me just give you this problem most people have is they get hooked on the word, their rooms or mansions or whatever, and we like to make it sound like we're getting palaces and all that. That's not really the true meaning of that word, first of all. Number two, heaven is not about the dwelling place. It's about the dwelling with a person. Amen. Heaven wouldn't be heaven without God. That's the idea behind heaven. So we need to stop looking at all the things of this world because that's our natural inclination and start realizing what he's telling us here. It's being in the presence of the Father. That's the bonus. That's what he's saying here. My Father's house has many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you that I'm going to prepare a place for you. Verse number 3. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back. That's key there. I will come back. That's a promise. I will come back, and I'm not just coming back. I'm going to take you to be with me that you also may be where I am in the presence of God. That's something that's so special. That's something that's so unique. Verse 4, he says, you know the way. There's amazing how many things we've forgotten, right? You know the way. You know the way. He's told his disciples this. You know the way to the place where I'm going. The place is heaven. The place is the presence of the Father. You know the way to the place where I'm going. Verse 5, Thomas, doubting Thomas. Thomas said to him, now remember, Thomas is one of those skeptics. He is the skeptical disciple. He says, Lord, we don't know where you're going, so how can we know the way? And that's an important question to ask, right? How can we get somewhere that we don't know where we're going? We don't know. And that's important. Jesus turns around and he gives us that. Jesus answered, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And that is not a limiting statement. That's a liberating truth. Did you get that? Hey, that is not, hey, we're exclusive. No, that's God's liberating truth. That's not a downer unless you don't want truth. He goes on to say this as we finish out in verse 7. If you really know me, if you really know me, Glenn, that's the verse there. If you really know me, you'll know my Father as well. It's not just belief. I was having this conversation after Sunday school with Glenn for the rest of you that didn't have that conversation with us. And the truth of the matter is, hey, you know what? Belief is not enough. Belief is not enough because even the devil believes. Satan believes. The demons believe. If you really know me, you'll know my Father as well. From now on, you do know him and have seen him. And that's a great hope and promise here. Today we're going to look at real quick 3 truths as we answer this question, is there really only one way to heaven? 3 truths that you should see that Jesus is pointing out here that'll help us with this question. Number 1, identify God's truth and gain clarity and courage to choose the right way. Isn't that the hardest part? Like, I don't know. The reason we stumble, like, go back to the restaurant thing. You go to a restaurant, it's got all these good things. I don't know. Which one do I get? Because we're worried that it's going to be something that we didn't want. We're not sure what the truth is. We're not sure. Have you ever been to a restaurant, something looked good and it was, you know what I'm saying? They overpromised and underdelivered on their cook. That's sad. And we do this with God sometimes. In fact, that's what a lot of people look at the Bible and go, wait a minute. Jesus is telling me he can get us to heaven. Come on, I don't know if I can believe that. And that's the limiting truth that we have in our lives. See, what we're trying to understand here, what Jesus is trying to help us with is identify God's truth. In fact, that's where he starts off in verse number 1. He says, do not let your hearts be troubled. Why? You believe in God. Now, he's talking to a group of Jewish residents. They had grown up all their lives understanding who God was. At least they thought they understood who God was. They understood this God who gave 10 commandments. They understood the God, Elohim, who created all the world and everything in it. They understood the God who gave the law. They understood this God who gave them the temple and the presence of God as he came down and filled that temple. They understood a God who needed to have sacrifices for sin, sacrifices for fellowship, sacrifices for everything. They understood him. And that's part of it, but he says, hey, you want to know something? You want something that gives you clarity and courage to move forward in this way? Believe in God, believe also in me. Or as I said earlier, the better translation would, believe, keep on believing. That's what he's saying here. if you believe in God, keep on believing. Keep on believing. Keep on believing. Press forward in your faith. Lean into it. Why was it going to be so important? Because just in hours, Jesus is going to be crucified, and they're going to run around going, What happened? We thought he was going to be the king. We thought he was going to be everything. And he's saying, hey, don't forget, when you're believing in God, believe that I'm God too. Because I'm the express image of God. That's what I want you to see. He goes on, verse 7, he says, if you really know me, here's this idea, if you really know me, you will know my Father also. Right? You'll know my Father as well. From now on, you do know him and have seen him. And he's saying, hey, you know what? You want help in this. And the first thing we have to understand is we need to identify God's truth and gain clarity and courage from it. This is the scariest time of their lives. You got to think about what's happening here. Their leader is going to be taken in the middle of the night. Hundreds of guards are going to come from the temple, and they're going to come and they're going to take him in the middle of the night, and they're going to do things like try him in the middle of the night. What judge holds court in the middle of the night? You know that's a phony court there, don't you? It is actually against the law. But yet they did all these things. They falsely accused him. They paid people to lie about him. And then when they didn't get what they wanted, the satisfaction of him incriminating himself, they drug him off to the Romans because they knew they didn't have really the authority to do this thing. Romans can kill anybody they want to. So they drug him before Pilate. And Jesus here, he's saying, hey, you know what? You're going to need some courage in these dark times. You're also going to need some clarity. You know, it's confusion. Confusion leads to chaos, doesn't it? Confusion leads to chaos. Worst thing, I remember as I worked as a principal, the worst thing I always told teachers, like, don't leave your classrooms unattended, right? Because anybody who's been a teacher, worked in a classroom, knows when the teacher walks out of the room, what happens? Chaos, yeah, everything. The craziest of crazies. I mean, it's almost like they think you're in a different time zone or something like that. And you could just, in fact, if you ever notice, I ask Heather, I guarantee Heather will be able to tell you this. She steps out and just like has the door cracked and chaos starts breaking out. Because why? They don't see you. They're doing whatever they want because chaos comes from that. And you know what? It's a lack of clarity that brings our chaos to our lives. And Jesus was trying to help us gain clarity. He says, hey, don't let your heart be troubled. Let me give you some focus in your life. And I tell you this today, if you're here today, you know one of the problems we have is not clarifying our personal faith. Personal faith in the personal Lord brings personal relief. That's what Jesus is teaching here. Hey, you want to get through the struggles that you have every day, and not just every day, about where you're going to spend eternity? Then make sure you clarify with courage God's truth. That is, Jesus is the way. There's only one way. See, if I wasn't 100% sure today that the only way to heaven is one way, Jesus Christ, I'd be terrified to go to sleep tonight. I'd be terrified to try a lot of things. If you weren't 100% sure that Jesus Christ was the answer to get to heaven, you wouldn't want to do anything risky. You wouldn't want to do anything to risk your life. See, he says, don't let your hearts be troubled. Keep on believing because it's your faith that's going to clarify this. See, Jesus understood what his followers were going to do, and Jesus asked his followers to trust in the midst of their confusion. And you know what? We live in a very confused world. Hey, they're confused about genders, right? Man, there's some confusion there, right? They're confused about all kinds of things. And be honest with you, there's so many perplexing things in life. That's why Jesus says, hey, you don't have to know everything. You just have to know the person who does. I am the person. Keep believing not just in God the Father, but believe in Jesus Christ, the Son of God, God the Son. And that's the whole idea. The second truth we need to have to help answer this question is that God's promises bring lasting comfort and confidence. And that's so important there. Lasting comfort and confidence. You know, as we go through this, what you have to realize, God promises help down the road. And you know, sometimes, you ever had a friend anybody had a friend they used to have, but don't have anymore? Isn't that tough? I mean, it's not because you had a major disagreement, maybe it was, but it may have been just that your friend moved on. Your friend moved out of town. Maybe your friend died. My best friend in high school died a couple years ago. Shocking to me. He was the healthiest guy I knew. He died. And we sit back and realize the situation these disciples are in, they're in a situation similar to that. Their best friend, the leader, the person who's been telling them where they're going, what they're doing, how they're going to do it, providing for them, giving them the answers of life, is getting ready to be taken in the middle of the night. And Jesus understands this. He knows what's going to happen ahead of time, even though they don't. And Jesus says, hey, I want you to hold on to the promise that I'm bringing to you, because it's going to give you comfort and confidence. Comfort and confidence. When nothing else is right in your life, the one thing you always can look about is Jesus Christ. The one hope we have is not the hope of our church. It's not the hope of a pastor, a deacon, or anybody else. It's the hope of Jesus Christ. Because everybody else will fail you. Everybody. Some of us in this room, we have stories of family members who failed us. Family, friends that have let us down. Jobs that have disappointed, right? Come on. You know who won't? Jesus Christ, because he's the same yesterday, today, and forever. In fact, he said this. Go back to verse 2. In verse 2, he says, my Father's house has many rooms. Well, that's nice to know. Is he bragging? Not at all. He says, if that were not so, would I have told you that I'm going to prepare a place for you? What the point is I've promised you a place to stay. I promised you a place to stay. I was in college one year. I needed some money. When they come to you and say, hey, your school bill needs to get paid, you better come up with some money. And so I had a friend. He was one of my roommates. He said, hey, you need to make some money? And that's always scary when a guy comes up and says that. Like, yeah. He says, are you willing to do pretty much anything? It's another one of those questions. I'm not sure I want to answer that one. But I said, yeah, because I really did trust him. His name was Doug. And he said, my dad's a pastor in Emporia. And one of the members of my church, my dad's church, is the facility manager of a place that makes plywood. There it is. I couldn't think of it. Plywood, yeah. Georgia Pacific. And it's a huge plant. And he said, this is Christmas break we're getting ready to go on to, so we got about 3-4 weeks that I can work. He said, all the people at the plant, they want to take Christmas vacation. So there's all these people are going to be taking breaks, but the plant doesn't shut down. The plant keeps going. So if you're willing to do just about anything, you can come down there and live with me and do this. So I wasn't sure what was going to happen. I knew the other problem I had was he hadn't asked his mom or his dad. So he's invited me to live in that house with him, his mom and his dad, and he hasn't said anything to them. And I was a little nervous, especially when I didn't know his dad real well or his mom. And so I showed up. They sort of treated me like I was uninvited. And actually, they told me how much I'd have to pay. And I was like, what? I didn't have any money. I was there because I didn't have any money. And then they let me know, hey, it's okay. We're just messing with you. Good friends, right? Jesus is not going to leave you hanging, right? That's the point. You know, I know people that have left me hanging before. I don't know if you ever have. There are people they say, hey, I'm going to help you. I'm going to do this. I'm going to provide somewhere where you can stay. I'm going to do this for you. And you know what's hard to do is when somebody breaks your trust like that, to put that trust out there. And Jesus is saying, hey, listen, I've got a Father who has unlimited resources. He's got rooms beyond rooms. And if it wasn't true, I wouldn't have told you this because I'm making a promise to you. Verse 3, he says, and if I go, conditions of the promise, and I prepare this place for you, I'm making up your beds, I'm making a place for you to be ready. Here's the promise. I will come back. I will come back. I will come back. And you know what? I think for most of us, the problem we have, and this is what he was trying to get his disciples to understand, is I'm going away, but I'm coming back. I'm going away, but I'm coming back, and I'm coming back better. He says, I will come back, and I'm going to take you to be with me so that you also may be where I am, the presence of God. And for most of us, we're like, I'm not sure I want to be in the presence of God. I read a book not too long ago that took a survey of people who were asked about heaven, who go to church. By the way, this is people who go to church every Sunday. Asked about heaven, and you realize Somewhere between 60 and 80% of the people who go to church every Sunday said that they weren't sure they really wanted to go to heaven. Because they weren't sure heaven would be a good place to go. And you know what I got to say? The reason you may think that, the reason you may be like, I'm not ready to go to heaven yet, is because you think too much of this world. And you think too little of God. Hey, you know what he's telling us? He's saying, best place ever. Best place ever. You ever had somebody say like, hey, I went to this restaurant the other day and it was really good, or I went to this place and it was really cool. Some of you guys do it on Instagram or whatever. I know we've got newlyweds over here that just came back from a cruise and they're wanting to let everybody know how great their cruise was. Hey, you know what? That cruise is going to be garbage compared to what heaven's going to be like. And we don't understand that. In fact, Paul told us that it's going to be mind-blowing because eye has not seen nor ear has heard the things that God has prepared for those who trust in him. And think about the greatest thing. Hey, I don't know whether it's a trip to Hawaii, the Caribbean, wherever you think paradise would be. Maybe it's Alaskan cruise or whatever. Those are pretty good things, but they're garbage compared to what Jesus has for us. And that's what Jesus is trying to understand. He's saying, I've got a dad who's building a house for you, a place for you to live, permanent dwelling, and I'm coming back for you, and I'm taking you to the presence of God Almighty. I'm taking you to the presence of God Almighty. Are you not excited about that? That should be the most thrilling thing we ever get to go to. He says in verse number 4, he says, you know the way. You know the way to the place where I'm going. Why did they know the way? Because there's only one way. That's what his point was. You know the way. It's through me. I'm the connection that you get. I had a friend, this best friend of mine, his dad was Secret Service agent in high school. He did bodyguard protection for the president. And so I got to go with my best friend to places that other people didn't get to go to, like Christmas parties at the White House for kids, the kid one. That was pretty cool. I got to do that. Not because they didn't know who I was. I'm just some schmuck. But I got to go with my friend. And that was a pretty cool thing. You ever gotten to do something pretty cool because you had somebody you knew? That's what Jesus is saying. You know the way. You know the way to the place that I'm going. And what's the place I'm going to? I'm going when he died. He didn't go to the back room. He didn't go to some maintenance shed. He didn't go to a Holiday Inn Express in heaven. I think we forget that sometimes. Jesus goes to the right hand, the right hand, the place of power, the throne of the universe. And he's saying, you know the way, and I'm taking you with me. You have a seat next to God. That's the awesome thing. See, our long-term future is secure in Jesus Christ. Jesus reassures his disciples who are just definitely scared, and you know what he's reassuring them about? Hey, Peter, your failures aren't going to keep you out of that place. Amen. Hey, you know what he's saying? He really is saying not just to Peter, but he's saying it to all of them. Your present, your past, and your future failures will not keep you from the place of God, because I prepared a place for you. Isn't that exciting? And that's the promise. And see, if you grab hold of that promise, hey, you know what? This isn't a promise like I make sometimes that I fail to keep. This isn't a promise like you make sometimes you fail to keep. This is a promise from Jesus Christ. He says, hey, you know what? I promise that I have room for you, and nothing you can do can keep you away from that. You just keep on believing that I am God and that I love you. Man, that's exciting truth there. Jesus reminded his disciples that they knew the way to heaven, even though in the middle of all this, they were confused about exactly where heaven was. The third and final truth that we have, and this helps us understand that there is only one way to heaven, is that we should proclaim God's truth to the changing world. Proclaim God's truth to the changing world. follow him or not. The choice to know that Jesus is the truth or not. See, Pilate was perplexed at the trial of Jesus Christ, and he said, what is truth? That's a question that has been resonating in our lives. What is truth? See, truth, once again, is not found in any philosophy. It's not found in any denomination or anything. It's found in a person. Jesus Christ is truth. He reveals God, and he exposes us for what we really are. And that's why we're not always comfortable about it. See, without Christ, men are under the lies of Satan and the devil. Without Christ, we merely wander looking for hope in the dark. You see, Christ is not merely just a teacher, though he was a good teacher. He's not merely just a teacher who came to reveal doctrine of God. He himself is the truth of God. Jesus said, I'm the life. The natural man is spiritually dead. When you were born, you were actually born dead. Dead in sin. Dead in all the bad excuses you give, dead in all the lies, dead in all the trouble. That's why no one had to teach you to do all those things. You naturally came about it. We're dead. We're alive to the things that don't matter the most. We're alive to this world and the world possessions, the dead to things of God. And the truth is only God, only Jesus Christ can make us alive. Without Christ, we're dead in our trespasses and sins. Christ is not merely, though, a physician who came to invigorate us from our old nature. He's not merely a physician who came to heal the broken lives and repair the defects. But according to John chapter 10, verse 10, Jesus said, I've come that they may have life and may have it to the full. That's what Jesus came. See, Jesus alone is the way, because he alone is the truth about God, and he alone possesses the life of God. Peter affirmed this in Acts chapter 4, when he spoke in Acts chapter 4, verse 12, and he said, salvation is found in no one else. Did you get that? There's only one way. No one else. Salvation is found in no one else, for there is no other name. I am. Right? No other name under heaven given to mankind which we must be saved. By which we must be saved. That's the truth. See, he is the way to the Father. That's what Jesus is. He is the truth incarnate. He is the life to all who believe in him. Let me leave you with one last thought. One way brings peace. One truth transforms. One life lights the path. Jesus Christ, the Son of God. God's Son. There's only one way. If you don't know the way, we didn't say all that to condemn you. We say that to give you hope. You don't rest your hope in a church. You don't rest your hope in a pastor. You don't have hope in anybody else. By the way, it's a personal relationship you need to have. That's the truth behind it. And in this personal relationship, you can't have it. You don't get to heaven because someone in your family is going to heaven. You get to heaven because you know Jesus Christ and you believe and repent from your sins and trust in him. That's what we invite you today. The big truth about this is there only one way. You know why people don't want one choice? It's because they don't want to have to conform to the one way. The truth is, the Bible tells us that every knee will bow. You can either do it willingly of your own today, or you can wait till another day. A day where you stand before God and you're judged. His judgment brings you to your knees. The choice is yours. One way